I feel deeply nervous standing here. Partly because it says on the programme I'm supposed to do a plenary speech or something, and I don't even know what one of those is, but what I was planning to do was just sort of a general introduction, and then Alice has done some of that anyway, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to talk about. Having said that, I think my main qualification for being here is that I've been mad about sheep since I was about this big. I'm one of these people, and you'll find them dotted across the Welsh landscape, who just spend their whole youth thinking about sheep, what they were going to do with them, lambing time, what the progression of the seasons was going to be, how much you were going to sell them for, when was market time. Sheep was my life when I was growing up. And I'm not alone in that. That is a common thing across the Welsh landscape, the rural landscape, that people are obsessed with. Obsessed is a bit the wrong word, but they feel so deeply about the livestock they keep on their farms. And I come from a scientific background, so yesterday evening going to Alice's exhibition was very interesting for me to see that. And to sort of see other people's responses and sort of think about some of my own responses to some of that. So that's been an interesting process. Delighted it's about sheep, because that gives me a nice easy way into pondering the artistic world as well. So I really encourage you all to, if you weren't there last night, to go and see it. I'm certainly going to be going back. I want to spend a bit of time sitting down with Theon's work as well. And watching that, so I think just from sort of getting a brief introduction to that is going to be well worth looking at, though I shouldn't be picking on individual things, it's just because there was so much to see. For my sins, I'm chair of the Arran Valley Trust, which is 20,000 hectares of land, Dŵr Cymru, Welsh water land, smack bang in the middle of Wales, 1% of Wales. And I also sort of do work with the Cambria Mountains Initiative as well, and we've got Cambria Mountains people here with us today, directors and staff of the Cambria Mountains Initiative. Most of my time I spend farming. I'm a sheep farmer, the main income comes from sheep farming, and so a little bit of insight comes from there. For those of you who don't get their income from farming, it can be difficult to understand it sometimes. I'm obsessed about sheep. I think about sheep a lot. A lot of my time, a lot of my dreams are about sheep. In fact, it's the thing that does get me to sleep at night. You know, if I'm just worrying about the rest of the world, I do. So sort of sit there thinking about the sheep, and it relaxes me. And the most enjoyable times of my life are not spent talking to people. They are spent out on the farm, walking around with the sheep. And I refuse to get a quad bike for that very reason, because for me, a quad bike would destroy all of the joy I actually get out of sheep farming, because there's not a lot of money to be made in it, it must be said. So at least I want all of the other benefits to be had. In terms of money, though, I mean, I've got a family to feed. All of the farmers locally in Wales have got families to feed, and they're thinking about, you know, how am I going to make enough money to survive here, to live here, to feed the family, send the kids to school, you know, go on holiday, all the things that everybody else in society worries about. We need an income as well, but our income becomes a multiple of how many sheep you have in very many ways. It's a factor of how good a farmer you are, how good your land is, how productive your land is, but also how many sheep you have. If you've got one sheep and you're making £30 a year out of it, you've got £30 at the end of the year. If you've got 100 sheep and you're making £30 a year, you've got £3,000. If you've got 1,000, you might have £30,000. Now, it seems like a very sort of monetaristic way to view the world, but actually economics drives all of us, and that is our income. And you know, woe betide us to forget the fact that we all need an income to come in to pay for the things that we need to do in life. So part of the context of the discussion, which I don't want to get lost in, is about economy, and it is about the fact that we want to live here. We want to farm. We have farmed for generations, many of us, but it is a multiple of how many sheep you have, and so productivity is really important in terms of really thinking about the landscape that we live in as well. And I don't want that sort of view to get lost when we're talking today. It is very clear to me that we live in a contested landscape. It's a landscape where lots of people have quite rightly got views upon what they want to happen here, what they think the future should look like. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's actually a fantastic thing that society, wider society, you know, sort of global society almost, wants to have a view and a role in what we do locally. But we mustn't then let that mean that local people and local view gets ignored in what happens locally as well, because both things are legitimate, and I think part of why we live in a contested landscape is that those two things sort of can clash with each other. The global or the national view can clash a little bit with the local view, and there can be misunderstandings and different ways of looking at it. Sometimes it's not even a misunderstanding, sometimes it's just a different worldview. But those things can lead to conflict. So, I mean, I hope things like today will help us to understand each other's perspectives a little better, and to try and find a common way forward. Alice has mentioned global challenges, and I don't, you know, we cannot ignore global challenges. I mean, there are very few of us left who don't accept that climate change is going to have a major impact upon us all, and is something we're sort of morally obliged to look at. We are practically obliged to adapt, but we're morally obliged to mitigate as well. So, you know, a global impact there having an effect locally. Alice has mentioned urbanisation, this disconnect between urban folk and rural folk, which is an increasingly, you know, is a real thing. And sort of she mentioned the digital divide as well, and I think that is there. People who spend time in nature, stroke the outdoors, there's a different way of looking at the world compared to if you spend your time with your head in a computer a lot of the time. So there's a divide there, and that can be a challenge. Biodiversity loss, nature loss, like climate change, it's something we can no longer ignore. The fact that, you know, 80%, 90% of our insects have disappeared is a major problem to all of us, and we have a moral responsibility at a local and a global level to worry about those things. And so that will affect how we view the future of our landscape as well. Population growth means more food. So there's all sorts of issues around how, as our population grows, how we cope with the fact that we need more land for nature, or more area for nature potentially, but we still need the food we've got. This reaches a sort of a central point here where we live in a sheep farming landscape, a livestock farming landscape, and we know that sheep ruminants produce a lot of methane. That can contribute to climate change. Some of the responses, a major response to the food situation is that we should all eat less meat, because meat can be an inefficient form, can be much more efficient to have a small area. If you're going to grow a hectare of corn, why wouldn't you just eat that yourself rather than feeding it to an animal and having the decrease in efficiency that can lead to? The counter-argument that you will hear locally is that sheep are using land that you can't grow crops on, and so we're producing food from something that is otherwise non-productive in a food sense. So there's different perspectives there, but meat isn't going to get it in the neck over the next 20, 50 years. There's no doubt about it. And trying to have a debate about less but better quality is a very nuanced debate to be having, set against just don't eat any meat. And maybe that'll come up, but it's something I think we all just need to reflect around, is that our local farming economy is built upon meat in very many ways, and it may well be that society changes or loses its taste for meat over time. So there's issues there for us. Right. Excuse me while I try and deal with the technology. A couple of apologies I need to make through this. I haven't recognised, I've stolen these, Nick will recognise these photos. These are actually borrowed from with Howells, a local shepherd, and I haven't even told him I'm showing them Tuesday, so don't tell him. I'm sure he won't mind anyway, but I'm just assuming it. I wanted to put these up, and we're talking about, I wanted just to recognise that there have been sheep here for a very long time. Jenny and Paul from Trussell are going to talk a bit later on, and it may or may not come across from their talk, but we are probably talking about 1,000 years of sheep farming in mid-Wales. Possibly quite a lot longer, depending when what those Bronze Age folk were up to. But it is a long history of sheep having an impact on the landscape, modifying the landscape, sheep management modifying the landscape. I think it's interesting to explore if we've had sheep for 1,000 years, are they also fit for the next 1,000 years? But there is a reason that we've managed to have sheep for 1,000 years. There is something about sheep which suits the local climate, the local geography, the local biological context as well. So it is well worth having a bit of a think about why there's been sheep here for that long. And do they continue to be a useful way of managing the land? But the point about having sheep here for that long is that inevitably it's been people keeping them, and so sheep have affected local culture. Sheep are at the core of a lot of local cultural tradition, a lot of folk memory, a lot of when my father did that, when my grandparents were alive, when my great-grandparents were alive. It goes back through generations, that feeling, and that is not to be ignored, and it has a great impact upon the cultural traditions of the area, and I think it's been very interesting sort of through the artistic side, looking at Alice's exhibition, and I think that for me has highlighted cultural associations and the cultural importance of livestock farming, and as that passes down through. But then, I've put up sort of old photos from 100 plus years ago and longer, but this is still going on today, and I'm sort of bringing that back to local economy nowadays, is that the local farmers are driving local economy in very many ways. The local mart, employing people depending upon the sheep farmers, CCF in town, Winstay in town, local contractors, fencers, people who drive tractors, people who milk the cows. Local economy, the one farmer getting a subsidy check and getting the check in from selling the sheep, that money is going around in a very small circle locally. So it's a cultural tradition, but it's an economic necessity locally, very significant at least locally. So we can't ignore that as a linkage. I don't know who's been up past Nantes area and on one of those bike routes that takes you up past Booker stuff, then a ruined house, a ruined old farm there now, and you won't see it, you barely see a sheep there anymore. You'll see a sea of Molinia on the flatter ground, and some overgrown, inverted commas, acid grassland up above the house. But you won't see that many sheep in the Pimlimon area, and you won't have done for 20 odd years probably. As a result, largely of agri-environment, S15 type arrangements, reducing stocking rates off the hill. Pimlimon itself was a populated hill. People lived there. There were 30 odd, 40 odd families deriving a living, 150, 200 people. Nowadays, there might be one farm on the one side and another farm on the other side, and that's it really. A lot of people biking through, a lot of people walking through, which is also something we need to recognise, that we live in a recreational landscape, and we live in a landscape where people's well-being and health is improved by being there. And that is a fantastic thing, and from my perspective, the more we can share that, the better. I mean, it's a national resource that people who live in urban areas will come out to us, and their quality of life is improved by doing the things they can do in the hills, and they then get connected to nature. And they then start to value some of the stuff they don't get when they're in Birmingham or in London or wherever. So a really important resource as well in terms of sort of recreation, well-being, all that other stuff. What other points did I want to make? Okay, it's going to get a bit random now because I'm going through. With global nature loss, we've got a problem. Local nature loss, we've got a problem too. Those figures, I think some of them minus 100% changes over 30, 40 years are You know, there might be 1 or 2%, that's an overestimate, but there has been serious and massive declines in our upland breeding bird assemblage across 40 odd years, and it must be said 40 odd years of agri-environment schemes as well, you know, with farmers being paid to do the right thing in terms of farming, what the public, what society wants farmers to do in terms of reducing stocking rates for the benefits of habitats, in theory for the benefits of species. You know, and it doesn't feel like it's happened, and farmers worry about that. You know, they've taken this money, the productivity of their farm, productivity agriculturally has declined, they can now keep fewer sheep because the land's gone backwards for farming, but actually the benefits haven't been seen there, and so farmers then feel a bit under the cosh. But they're frustrated that they've done all that work and made that effort and it hasn't achieved very much, but they also then feel under the cosh because they're now not producing much food, so nobody values them as food producers, but they're also not producing much nature, so nobody's valuing them as nature producers either. And it's like, well, you know, you wanted us to do this, and now look where we are. You know, it's a common reaction from farmers, you know, and I feel that way as well. But it's just something I think we all need to recognise as being an issue. Okay. I wanted to explain, so this is, because I know it's slightly better, I'm going slightly over the top of the hill over towards Paris, so we've got, can we have the lights down a bit? Whoever's got near lights. So I apologise for Edward Howells for stealing his photos, I apologise to Google for stealing their maps. Please don't tell anyone in Google. So we've got Ceredigion on the left-hand side, we've got Paris from about there, going that way. We're looking at the Ellen Valley lakes in the middle, and the reservoirs in the middle. Illustrating a couple of points, really. Big chunk of conifers, you know, largely planted after the Second World War. There will be plantations from after the First World War, and there'll be a few plantations from prior to that. But big chunks of Sitka spruce, late 1940s, 50s, early 60s. 20%, 15, 20% of the Cameron Mountains covered in this stuff, really not a lot underneath. An argument that there's stuff on top. Black grouse benefited temporarily because black grouse love to have a little bit of, you know, freshly grown conifers. They hate it when the conifers are mature, they all bugger off, but they like it when they're young. So that's one point I wanted to make. Water. You know, we're talking about national priorities. Clearly, 1894, when these things were set up, is a national priority from a decade, from a century prior. But water is always controversial in the Welsh context. The new Wales context, obviously, is it's not just about water quantity and producing as a product, it's also about flood regulation. So we start to think in natural resource management terms. Once we start thinking that way, we start to look at these areas here. Blanket bogs, you know, 10 metres of peak across large swathes of it, a metre plus across the rest of it. You know, major carbon stores, potentially carbon sequestration, but also water stores as well, and regulating river flows and things like that. Not that important, regulating river flows in the Ellen Valley, because it's all done automatically according to European laws anyway. But points to make about it. What else do we see? We see an awful lot of the white stuff. Most of the white stuff is millennia. You know, when you're walking through it, it's tussocks this tall. You won't spot very many sheep here. There will be fewer sheep here than there were. I'll show you a little graph in a minute of that. You've got areas of darker here, so up over here. We've got some heathland up on this hill. We've got some heathland up on this hill over here as well. There's two hen harriers, one on either side of the road there. Two hen harrier pairs. There's red grouse in the heathland. There's red grouse dotted around the blanket bog. We're not talking about shooting red grouse. They're not at that densities. If you're lucky to get one per hectare, you know, they're probably one per 5 or 10 hectares. I'm winging it here a little bit. I don't want to go, oh no, what's he talking about? Yeah. A couple of pairs of merlins. So there's some merlins that will be feeding in the Freedland in the spring. feeding off the wind chats and the stone chats and the little birds, which merlins love to eat, and then they'll be nesting on the conifer edges down here. A couple of pairs if they're lucky. The whole area is a special protection area for birds, for which merlin is one of the prime targets. There's 1 or 2 pairs if we're lucky left. Okay, next I wanted to focus in a bit and play a game of Spot the Curlew. And the game of Spot the Curlew is 100 years ago, 50, 80 years ago, there would have been curlew in the lowlands, there would have been curlew in the uplands. They were quite densely packed across the landscape. Nowadays, that whole picture I showed you, we're now come down to Craigor Reservoir, and we're playing Spot the Curlew because there's about 20 curlew who live on that patch of land, 50, 60 hectares there. They wander over the reservoir to eat on the other side, and they occasionally wander up Avon Elan as well. Those are the curlew we've got left in central mid Wales. That's it. They're all gone. We don't really know why that is, I don't think. Maybe I want to talk about it later. But it might be, my understanding of curlew habitat is they need a mosaic to live. They need somewhere to nest. They need somewhere for the chicks to feed. They need somewhere for themselves to feed. So they need a mosaic of slightly improved land mixed with damp areas of short grass mixed with damp areas of long grass. Now, these used to be things that they found habitat for both in the lowlands and in the uplands. Nowadays in Britain they only find it in the uplands, and very few of them at that still find it. This farm here, which I don't know whether I should mention who it is or not, but anyway, I recommend next time in the Yarra Valley, come and drive up the road here, just park your car somewhere here before you get to the farm, May or June, just listen to the bird sound. It is absolutely fantastic, and if you stay there for half an hour, you'll see the curlews rising up, defending their nest. They'll be being mobbed by the kites, mobbed by the crows, mobbed by ravens. It's a spectacular sight to see, and it's a spectacular soundscape as well. And it's a real loss that we don't have curlew left. The only thing I can say about this farm is you've got 10 acres of hay meadow, good quality biodiverse hay meadow there, but enriched ground. He's got like 30 cattle there. He cuts some of the millennia, he grazes the cattle down in this bottom area. There's lots of wet flushes, there's short grass, there's long grass, there's a mixed mosaic of habitat, and the curlew would appear to be doing pretty well on what he's giving them. But those 30 cattle are possibly 80% of the cattle that actually live in the 20,000 hectares of the Elan Valley. And it may or may not be a coincidence that those cattle, that diversity of management is there and is producing the curlew that are there. Am I going on? Okay. 10 years ago, if we'd been sitting here, everybody would have been saying there's too many sheep around, we've got too many sheep around. The main thing everybody worried about nature would have been saying was there's too many sheep. Nowadays, we don't say that, you don't hear it anymore, and that's because nowadays sheep numbers in the hills and the uplands have declined dramatically. So I studiously went through the Elan Valley records when at shearing time, since 1878, they'd been doing an account of the number of sheep that were sheared every year across this state. And that's what the figures show you. A few highlights. We've got a war, numbers drop. Showing you the Second World War's numbers go up. And then we have 1947, bad winter. Numbers absolutely plummeted. I mean, it was a really bad winter. Numbers plummeted, and they plummeted again in 1948. They went down in 1948, and then quietly go back up again. We have another bad winter in 62. We have another bad winter again later on. And then finally, look, in the 1980s, we're starting to hit the ewe premium days when we were all getting 18 or 20 quid to keep every ewe that we had. And what my father used to call the wind blowers were always kept. And the wind blowers are the sheep that are so skinny and so near death. But you've got 18 or 20 quid, so why wouldn't you keep them? And then later on, then there's 10 or 20 years, I can't remember, of the Cameron Mountains ESA, where stocking levels were sort of maintained pretty flat, and then we're getting into Tirweddau'r days, and numbers start to plummet off. But what's interesting for me, I suppose, is that certainly towards the latter stages, you've got sheep numbers at historically low levels, only as low as 1947, basically, which was a 2-year period, 1947, 48, a 2-year period of low sheep numbers, historically low over 140, 50-year period of low sheep numbers. That has only been matched in more recent times by a 10 to 20-year or longer period of low sheep numbers driven by agri-environment payments. It's food for thought. I don't know how to interpret that data necessarily. Okay. Those were the things I wanted to say. I apologise they were rather incoherent and mixed up, but I think there's a lot to think about there. That's the thing, is I can't help thinking there's so much to think about. I can't come up with the solutions, but I'm hoping today we will be able to talk through some of this stuff. And I know we've got people who know a lot more about it than me in the audience, so it'll be very interesting to learn as well. Thank you.